There's a beautiful old quilt on the back of my armchair. A friend made it for my husband and me on our 20th anniversary. Each patch tells a story, and the thousands of tiny stitches are the threads that hold it all together, turning scraps of fabric into a single warm embrace. A long marriage is a lot like that quilt. It's built from countless small moments, shared joys and quiet sorrows, all stitched together by threads of connection. But those threads, as strong as they are, need tending. Sometimes, without even noticing, they can grow thin. I remember a time, years after the children were grown and my husband's sermons were filling the church, but our own home had grown quiet, that I looked at him across the dinner table and felt a sudden, gentle pang of loneliness. We were sharing a life, but we had stopped sharing ourselves. The threads hadn't broken, but they had become frayed, and a subtle distance, a coolness had seeped in. We were two people living under the same roof, held together by history, but no longer by the daily, active work of connection. Finding our way back wasn't a miracle. It was a quiet mending, a patient restitching, one thread at a time. If you've ever felt that gentle drift in your own home, perhaps our journey of mending can offer some comfort and a little light for the way forward. The first thread we had to reweave was the one of genuine listening. As a teacher, I learned early on that you can't impart a lesson to a child who doesn't feel heard first. And as a pastor's wife, I sat with so many couples who had mastered the art of talking past one another. They would debate and problem solve and negotiate, but they had forgotten to simply listen. My husband and I had fallen into that same trap. Our conversations had become logistical, about the house, the finances, the children's latest news. We were exchanging information, not connection. I remember my dear friend Arthur speaking of his beloved Eleanor. He said the greatest gift she gave him was her full attention, that when he spoke, she listened with a stillness that made him feel like he was the only person in the world. That is a profound act of service. So we started small. We set aside time each evening with the television off and our books set aside to simply be present with one another. I learned to listen not with the intent to reply, but with the desire to understand. I learned to hear the weariness behind his words about a church meeting, and he learned to hear the hope in my stories about a former student. Listening is the loom upon which a relationship is woven. It might be worth asking yourself, are your conversations about connection or just transactions? Next, we had to rediscover the profound power of showing up for each other in small, almost invisible ways. We often believe that a marriage is saved by the grand gestures, the expensive anniversary trip, the dramatic apology. But a marriage is lived in the thousands of tiny moments in between. It's the small, consistent acts of service that strengthen the fabric of a life together. I think of my friend Elias, the woodworker. He once told me that he doesn't build things, he just pays attention to the details, and the thing builds itself. A marriage is just like that. My husband was a man of great faith and grand ideas, but the gesture I remember most from that time was so simple. He knew I loved watching the finches at the feeder outside the kitchen window, and he noticed, without my saying a word, that I often forgot to refill it. So he took it upon himself every single morning to make sure it was full. It was a silent act of love that said, I see you. I pay attention to what brings you joy. In return, I started making sure his favorite teacup was always clean and waiting for him beside the kettle. These weren't bargains we struck. They were gifts, freely given. It was the practice of paying attention, of choosing to serve one another not out of duty, but out of love. This is the steady, quiet work that mends a frayed connection. The third thread was learning to find a new shared purpose. For 30 years, our shared purpose was immense and all-consuming, raising our children. Our lives were a whirlwind of school plays, scraped knees, and family dinners. We were a team, united in a common mission. When our youngest child left for college, the silence in the house wasn't just quiet, it was a void. Our primary reason for being a team had graduated and moved on. We had to find a new reason to work together, a new song to sing. It was a bit like being students in a new class, feeling clumsy and unsure. We saw how our friends Thomas and Clara navigated this. They had their own separate passions, her art and his garden. But they made a point of sharing in the process, of celebrating each other's small victories. For my husband and me, our new purpose became our community. We started volunteering at the local soup kitchen together. In that humble place, serving meals side by side, we weren't just a retired pastor and a retired teacher. We were a team again. We found a shared joy in service, a connection that wasn't about looking at each other, but about looking in the same direction, outward together. A marriage, I believe, is strongest when it is about more than just the two people in it. If something in this is resonating with you, I'd be so grateful to know. You might just type, "I'm listening" in the comments below, so we know we're in this together. It helps to know we are not alone on this path. We also had to learn to be patient students of one another again. People don't stop growing and changing just because their hair turns gray. The man I was married to at 65 was not the same man I had married at 25, and I was not the same woman. We had spent decades so focused on the roles of mother and father that we had stopped being curious about the person behind the role. We had to approach each other with the fresh eyes of a student, eager to learn. I started asking him questions again, not about his schedule, but about his thoughts. What was he reading? What did he dream about? I found that the quiet man I thought I knew so well had a whole world of new ideas and reflections stirring within him. He, in turn, began to see me not just as the ever-competent manager of our home, but as a woman with her own hopes for this new chapter of life. It required humility. It meant admitting that we didn't have all the answers about each other. It was a slow and gentle rediscovery, like turning the pages of a familiar book and suddenly finding a beautiful new chapter you never knew was there. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we had to practice the grace of daily forgiveness, not for big betrayals, but for the tiny, unspoken resentments that can build up like dust in a closed-up room, making the air stale. The forgotten errand, the thoughtless word, the moments of quiet neglect, these are the things that slowly erode intimacy. As a person of faith, I've always believed in the power of forgiveness, but I had come to see it as something reserved for significant wrongs. I realized it had a much more important daily application. It was the conscious choice to wipe the slate clean each morning, to not let the sun go down on our small irritations. It was about offering the same grace to my husband that I hoped to receive from God. It was choosing connection over being right. This small, daily practice of letting go didn't erase our imperfections, but it stopped them from becoming barriers between us. It allowed the air in our home to become clear again, filled not with the dust of old grievances, but with the warmth of mutual grace. The life you build with another person is a living thing. It needs light and air and tending. It is not a monument to be built and then admired from a distance. It is a garden to be cared for day in and day out. The threads of connection don't fray overnight. It happens slowly, stitch by stitch, in the moments we stop listening, stop serving, and stop seeing the person in front of us. But the mending also happens slowly, stitch by stitch. It is found in the quiet decision to listen, in the simple act of filling a bird feeder, in finding a new shared purpose, and in offering the gentle grace of a clean slate. It is the most sacred work we can do, turning the scraps of our everyday lives into a beautiful, warm, and enduring shelter. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today, for sharing this quiet space. The journey of finding our way back to one another, as we've talked about, truly begins with looking inward. If you're ready to take that first gentle step on your own path of reflection, I've created something just for you. It's a free guide called The First 5 Questions, a gentle guide to rediscovering your story. It's designed to help you begin this exact process in a quiet and meaningful way. You can download it right now for free from the link in the description or at eldersechoes.com. Be gentle with yourself this week.